Rev up your engines!
Here we go again with electric cars. Hyundai had to recall 82,000 of their battery electric cars, and they have to replace all the batteries in them. Now, here's the thing. If you remember in the past, they had problems with the batteries. They started on fire when they're recharging, and they told people only recharge it to 90%. Some of them had computer programs, so you couldn't recharge them more than 90%. And they thought, oh, we'll fix it with a software fix. Some of the ones that they did software fixes on started on fire. So now they got to replace them all. But hilarious thing is, the Chevy electric cars, the Chevy Bolts, they get the batteries that come from Korea too. Same as the ones in the Hyundais. But GM is still fighting it and saying, no, we can fix it with the software upgrade. Because, of course, they don't want to have to spend the money to replace all the batteries in the electric cars. It would make them look like another fiasco of General Motors buying a battery from the wrong place. It'll be interesting how that pans out. We'll see if they're forced to recall all theirs and replace the batteries, not just some stupid software fix. It'd be interesting to see what happens. But it just goes to show that, this whole battery scene, it's not proven. These are new cars, too. Imagine when they get old, what's going to happen to the batteries. A big warning about batteries. People promise you all kinds of stuff. And then down the line, when they break down and you're stranded and you got to buy a $12,000 battery, they might question, gee, why did I buy this battery car in the first place? And of course, it's a double-edged sword here too, because they got to replace 82,000 of these batteries. Well, they're always running out of batteries and lithium. That means there's 82,000 batteries can't go in a new car. So maybe battery cars, stay back a while and see how it pans out, because it's still in the process of being worked on. Roy Hines says Scotty got a 2010 Honda Pilot, 125,000 miles. It ticks when it's cold. It's taken care of, oil changed every 5,000 kilometers. Doesn't burn any oil at all. Once it gets warm, the sound disappears. What's your take? All right. What happens is those have variable valve timing assemblies, and as they age, a lot of times you get a little ticking noise when they're cold as the oil pressure pumps up. As long as it goes away when it's warmed, I personally would live with it, because to fix it, you generally have to take the engine apart and buy some very expensive parts. Now, if it starts ticking all the time when it's warmed up, then you got to decide, hey, what are you going to do? But I've had customers with those Hondas, and they tick for 10 years, and they're still driving them down the road. Keep changing the oil, take care of it, and baby it. Then if something actually does start ticking when it's warm, if you want to take it to a mechanic like me and have them pull the top off the valve covers and analyze it and say, oh, maybe you just need rocker arm or something, or maybe it's more, then you go into it. But as long as it doesn't do it when it's warmed up, live with it. Shalise says, I got 2011 Chevy Traverse, 85,000 miles. It's falling apart. I'm tired of auto mechanics relentlessly trying to bend me over. Will it ever end? Help me. Sad but true. You got a 2011 Chevy Traverse. They're pretty poorly made vehicles. As they age, they tend to fall apart. Now, I don't know the mechanics you're going to. There are many crooked mechanics out there these days that try to rip people off all the time, even with Toyotas and Hondas. I've had people bring me Toyotas, new customers, and they'll show me the money they'd spent in 5 years having it repaired, and I'm like, they're ripping you off. These cars don't fall apart like that with this low mileage. They're just ripping you off. So you're probably getting ripped off somewhat too. They're horrible vehicles. What you want to do is try to find a guy like me. Watch my video, How to Find a Good Mechanic, Scotty, on YouTube. Type that in and watch it. Ask your friends. Maybe a guy will be honest like me and say, look, they're junky vehicles, but yours is still running. I'll tell you when either the engine or the transmission's starting to go out, and then you get rid of it. Try to sell it now if it's running okay and see what you can get. If you get enough money to buy a good used Toyota or Honda, go right ahead. But most smart people won't give you beans for 11 Traverse with 85,000 miles. So if you can't get much money for it, you might as well just drive it until the wheels fall off, then get something else and never buy another one. Learn from your mistake. JJ Bendo Pie says, I was told by a certified mechanic, in quotes, the reason for the failure of my automatic transmission in my 2012 Nissan Rogue is due to bad gasoline. I never heard of this. Can you advise? Thank you. Okay, well, it sounds kind of like a fishy story to me. The only thing that could theoretically happen, and you would notice this, is let's say you really got bad gasoline and your engine ran like crap. So your engine was jerking and pulsating all the time. Yes, from the engine jerking and pulsating, that's going to jerk and pulsate the transmission, which could end up damaging it over thousands of miles of driving that way. On the other hand, if it wasn't jerking down the road and it ran smooth, that's a line of hoo-ha. It doesn't have anything to do with it. It would have have to be jerking all the time, and then that jerking of the engine would feed back into jerking the transmission, and yes, that could do some damage to it. It seems far-fetched to me. You would have felt it running like crap. It's sad, but you got a Nissan Rogue, and it's a 2012, and they're just terrible Jetco transmissions. That's just the way that it goes. They break on their own. They don't need any help. But if it did jerk, yes, it could have been gasoline, but if it ran okay otherwise, no. That's people talking on that one. James St. Clair says, are there any synthetic oils that prevent the breakdown of plastics and engines, like plastic timing chain guides? Well, you change the best oil out there are those new ones, the GF6 oils. Now, there's GF6A and GF6B. The GF6B is for the 0W16 engines and all the new engines, and that's the only engines you can use in it. But the GF6A oils, they can be used in any car as long as it takes that oil. They got 020, 1030, they got a bunch of different weights, and that's what you would want to use. That's the best oil. It's going to give you the most protection of any oil out there. But that said, if you buy a vehicle that's just made like crap, that has bad timing chain tensioners, doesn't matter what kind of oil you put in, they're just going to wear out because they were cheaply made. I see that all the time in a lot of GM vehicles. The plastic chain tensioners just come apart when they get older because they were poorly made plastic in the first place. Back in the day, they used to make them out of metal, coat them with a little bit of rubber, and maybe they'd make a little noise as the rubber wears off, but there's still the metal tensioner with oil on it that kept them tensioned right, and then they didn't start rattling around. Plastic on that stuff, garbage, but, you know, that's the way the world's going. Planned obsolescence. Dennis D4 says, I'm looking for trucks, and I saw a Ford F-150 Super Cab at a dealership for $7,400, but it's a 1998. They say it has 94,000 miles on it. I looked it up on Kelly Blue Book in Edmonds, and they said it's $3,500 to $4,500. The dealers always charge that much more because they want $7,400. Well, that's just typical, you know. And the sad thing now is with this coronavirus stuff, and they didn't build as many cars. The prices of cars are going up. It's capitalism. If it's a limited commodity, they raise their price. The price of new cars goes up. The price of used cars always follows, because if people can't afford a new one, they're going to buy a used one. So the used guys are like, aha, we got them now. The new ones cost more, so we'll raise our prices too. That's just the way that it goes. Plus, dealers always charge way too much money for their cars anyways. I've seen cars that I had personally bought from my sons for $500. Cars that had 20,000 miles more than theirs, they wanted $5,500 at the dealer. So that's just the way they go there. Deepagram 2065 says, my 2010 4Runner SR5 4-wheel drive makes a clunk noise and feels like I got tapped on the rear end when I come to a stop and let off the brake to go again. It's a common issue with the slip yoke binding. Some guys grease them with Zerk fittings. It goes away for a while. Some take the drive shafts apart and grease them with Teflon grease. Another option is replace the whole assembly. Will it cause damage if I don't fix it? Well, not really. GM had the same problem with a bunch of their trucks that they clunked. Ford had some, and yeah, you could keep taking them off and greasing them and putting them in. The minor clunk really doesn't seem to hurt anything. Now, if it bothers you, I'd say put a Zerk fitting, and then you can go under there every once in a while and grease it. That's an easy thing to do. Now, if you take it all apart and grease them with Teflon grease, that's going to wear off too, and then you got to take it apart again. I'd put a Zerk fitting in myself. That would make the most sense, and then you can just go under there and grease it real easy. And I do that every once in a while. That's the easiest fix. You don't have to really take anything apart, and it can last for quite some time. But if you don't do anything, I've seen people drive them years that way, and it clunks, but it doesn't break anything. We see automatic transmissions nowadays. Some of them even have 10 speeds. Well, believe it or not, there used to be a 2-speed. The most famous one really is the Chevy Power Glide, and believe it or not, they were still putting it in cars up to 1973. The 1973 Chevy Nova was the last one to have this 2-speed Power Glide. They got the nickname for us mechanics and car aficionados as slip and slide, because as they wore, they often slipped, but they could run forever. The only problem was, with only 2 speeds, they didn't have such hot acceleration. And back in the day, some of these things had like 90 horsepower and a 2-speed transmission, and they were really slow off the line. The reason you have a bunch of gears is so that the ratios are close together, so it can keep shifting for power. When you got a real long first one, and it only goes a second, that's it. You're not going to have all that much acceleration or all that much top speed with good gas mods, because the higher speeds with only a 2-speed, you're going to still be spinning the engine pretty fast. No, they didn't really think about gas mods back in those days anyways. But, I mean, there's still some of these 2-speed Power Glides going around. I've seen them. They were simple. They were only only 2-speed, so there's a lot less things to go wrong. And of course, an honorable mention would be the Honda 2-speed, but they weren't actually fully automatic. You had to put them in 1 and then shift them into 2. They weren't a truly fully automatic. The GM one, you just put it in and drove it. You didn't have to manually shift it. It would do it itself. Where the Honda, you had to go from 1 to 2 in those little bitty, tiny little cars with a 550cc motorcycle engine. But you could get a Chevy Nova with a 2-speed Power Glide automatic transmission. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.